Trans people ultimately represent something dangerous and uncomfortable. The idea of self-acceptance. Behind every anti-trans thought and word and deed is a prevailing fear of the self. It is not just about gender identity. It's every way in which we are all conditioned to be someone we're not. For many, trans people shatter the arbitrary importance of conformity, reminding any given person to embrace parts of their authentic self they buried long ago, and they're terrified of digging that up. I want to share with you all a little bit of a short story about my identity, but not just my gender identity, but the whole sense of myself. Because you see, a lot of people think that being transgender is about being lost and confused about who you are, your gender identity, and what your role is in society today. It's on the contrary. You see, what they're describing is something called gender dysphoria, and even that description is not what gender dysphoria is. Experiencing gender dysphoria basically means having to perform a role in society that is expected of us that is completely alien to our character, to our person. To me, I don't think that's a form of confusion. I don't think that's somebody who's lost. I would argue that that is the first step of somebody fully discovering who they are and what their role is in society. Let me explain a little further. So, for about half my life, I identified as a punk. It was partially due to the music that I listened to, but also because of my outlook on life. What was important to me wasn't so important to others. What was important to others wasn't so important to me. Someone who would rather drive to a fast food chain for lunch would wince at the idea of me suggesting that we should walk to a restaurant because it's cheaper, it gets us exercise, it's more fun, it's better for the environment, you can take the scenic route, and it's more of an adventure, and it's really not that far anyway. Because I was taken advantage of while growing up in multiple different instances, I learned that there's a lot of value in having a spine. And what I mean by this is taking no one's bullshit. And throughout my life, I found myself sticking up not just for myself, but also for other people when necessary, even in unwinnable fistfights where I had to defend someone who was being harassed. In addition, I was always willing to try something new, no matter what it was, even if it was something that I would end up hating afterwards. But trying something that you've never tried before has more often than not proven that I ended up liking something that I was previously skeptical of. So with all of these liberatory values and characteristics, I think punk rock has informed me on this way of thinking, not just musically or politically, but also just primarily how I see the world and my role in its existence.
Let's not cut the problem out of the phrase gender is an illusion.
But within the mid-2010s, I became disillusioned with punk rock. Punks are far from perfect, of course, and a lot of punks are idiots who dwell on the very reactionary way of thinking. And I think at one point in the previous decade, I became quite pessimistic because it became easier for me to just say, yeah, I'm out, this is cringe. However, this took place around the same time that I began to transition. And for a while, I would hear from, for example, trans women that they miss watching football, but it's too masculine for them to do as an activity. I think that's a load of shit, because I think that's when it dawned on me that having masculine interests as queer trans women is ultimately unimportant and rather trivial if we're really getting down to it. Gender roles are placed on us non-consensually. We didn't really agree to live in a binary patriarchal system. We just kind of existed, and then suddenly we were met with the terms and conditions of our society. And usually the people who are preaching about so-called biological essentialism, they're the same people who don't believe in evolution and believe in a magical sky daddy with a temper tantrum problem. I don't take them seriously even a little bit. It's so really trivial to me when I see other trans women getting really anxious about having masculine interests like football or wrestling. Let's face it, cis women love football too, and not always just with their husbands either. Cis women also have a place in punk history, like the band Bikini Kill. The same with queer women, like the band Screaming Females. And the same with trans women, like the band's g.l.o.s.s. And against me. I find myself sometimes relating to the hardcore punk / metalcore band called See Space Cowboy, which is definitely a reference to the anime Cowboy Bebop. Their lead singer is a trans woman by the name of Connie Sigarbosa. I apologize, my Italian is absolutely rusty. How's Italy doing, by the way? Uh-oh. Well, that's not good. However, in regards to her gender identity, Connie had this to say in an article published by PureNoise.net. I don't want to be pigeonholed as just another trans woman singing political punk lyrics. A lot of these songs were written from an emotional standpoint and really helped me throw my identity out the window. I hold my values true, but my identity doesn't define who I am. I wanted to show I'm more than that. When I first read this, I admit, I got a little defensive, thinking that maybe she was also disillusioned and throwing her identity away. But after a little bit more thinking and research, I came to the conclusion that I was wrong. She isn't doing any of that at all. Instead, she's making her identity more than just her being transgender. She said it very clearly, I'm more than that. Connie is the combination of her entire personhood, her autonomy, and all of her experiences, trials, and struggles make up who she is. She is the manifestation of decades of growth into the human being that she is today, and she has a story to tell you. In another article published by Kerrang this time around, before forming the band See Space Cowboy, she was diagnosed with OCD and bipolar disorder. She's also been fighting addiction throughout her entire life. And you must understand that this impacts her songwriting. For those who think that cis women could never scream like that, I got 3 recommendations for you. Arch Enemy, Scarp, and nausea. Trans women are women, get over it. From the same Kerrang article, Connie went on to say, if we make art for catharsis, there'd be no point in writing an album that wasn't true. There's way more validity in writing an album that doesn't paint me in the best light, but is me. It's my life. After Natalie died, I did a lot of things I'm not proud of. I was doing a lot of drugs. I was having sex with a lot of people. I was doing everything I could to not grieve. Anything to distract myself was fair game in my mind at the time, and I was desperate for anything. So it's liberating in a way to just say, this is who I am, and not worry so much about people judging you. I already deal with so much of that being trans, so why not just apply that to every other part of my life too? This article was about their new album at the time, aptly titled The Romance of Affliction, which Connie elaborates that the album is about the romanticization of what we struggle with on a day-to-day basis, but in this case, with this album, it's a defiance to the people romancing her struggle while consuming the album. She continues by saying, I find it really interesting that we can hold art and music as the thing that gives your life meaning. If you believe that you can give your life meaning. What happened to me after finishing this record illustrates that that's not necessarily enough. It's not the miracle cure that we want it to be, or that we romanticize it as. We want to say, music saved my life, but not really in my case, you know? It doesn't really work like that. Just a brief tangent, this reminds me so much of Cowboy Bebop, not just because of the band name, but because of what she is saying philosophically speaking. In Cowboy Bebop, you meet these different characters who are all on this Bebop ship. Some of them come and go, but they're all kind of united in the fact that they all have a weight to carry. Each of them have some kind of traumatic, tragic history that put them in their current circumstances. Massive spoiler alert for those who have not finished the anime, but Spike dies, and as the camera pans out, the choir is singing, and the credits roll, you are then presented with one final screen. You're gonna carry that weight. Because in all of the 20-something episodes that we spend with Cowboy Bebop's cast and crew, learning about their trauma, their past, all of their losses, these are things that matter so deeply to them that it informs their way of life. The Bebop crew is not fully open about their past to each other. They don't really fully disclose everything. But either way, that's what the characters are united on. The weight that they carry. And all of this reminds me of when Connie said, what happened to me after finishing this record illustrates that that is not necessarily enough. It's not the miracle cure that we want it to be, or that we romanticize it as. No, you listen to this record, and you're gonna understand what Connie had to go through. I wrote a song in a similar vein one time, especially with the vulnerabilities that Connie expressed. Take a listen to this song that I wrote. Whether or not you choose to romanticize our music, it's irrelevant to the fact that you're gonna carry that weight when you finish listening. Connie's music and her perspective on her own music is entirely subjective, but it's a legitimate point. And more importantly, punk rock is an avenue for her to express herself subjectively in the most vulnerable, raw, and truthful way that she can. And I hope that I explored that properly in this video. And as I've said repeatedly on this channel, punk has always been a space for the black sheep, those who have already been outcasted and marginalized repeatedly in our society. And queer people are in the punk spaces because It's where we usually are when we want to feel like ourselves without that judgment. And I feel like Connie is hitting on a very critical point when she says that it's very liberating to say that this is who I am and to completely disregard of the people who judge her. And as a trans punk myself, I can deeply relate. Even the most moral majority Christian wet wipe has skeletons in their closet. If you're Ronald Brown, those skeletons are the children that you cannibalize. And if you're Joshua Duggar, those skeletons are the children on your external hard drive. And if you're Brendan Smith, well, I could go on. But drug addiction, OCD, and bipolar disorder are all things that people in the punk scene can relate to, because people with those things that they struggle with are also systemically marginalized. Being trans on top of all of that is just another layer of that marginalization. Ooh, intersectionality! And like Connie said, it's nothing to romanticize about. People who are struggling with addiction need resources to get them the help that they need if they choose to recover. And unfortunately, our economic system doesn't make that readily available for everyone equally. Speaking of systemic bullshit, as of recording this, the state of Florida is introducing Bill 1780 that would allow people to sue you for defamation if you ever accuse them of being racist, sexist, homophobic, or transphobic. Talk about land of the free, where we pass bills to police our speech. Which is absurd, because we should be passing bills forbidding hate speech and hate crimes. I'm sure Biden will whip up something real soon, y'all. Just you wait. Any day now. But just a personal opinion here, I feel like the kinds of people who romanticize shit like that were the kinds of people in 2016 who got excited when Donald Trump was elected because they believed, holistically and sincerely, that the music coming out was going to be really good because everyone was going to be struggling. And as a trans musician myself, I find that mentality to be absolutely not only obnoxious, but it should be militantly gatekept. Because the kind of person who would want that is also the kind of person who falls under that conservative will never be punk rock video that I made last year. You all should go check that out. When we musicians write lyrics, it comes from the heart. It comes from a vulnerable place of hurt and anguish. When you listen to our music, you gotta show respect. Otherwise, you don't respect our music. When your best friend goes through a breakup or a divorce, do you ask your best friend to write a new song for you? No, cause that's fucking stupid. And that's the entire point. When we write vulnerable and raw songs like that, you have to respect it as something that is put out into the universe. So for me, punk has always been something I've already been for such a long time. It's like integral to my identity. So being trans is only a realization that all of those negative reactionary aspects of punk rock that I didn't really like at the point of me becoming disillusioned with it, they don't define me. Like, I'm punk in spite of being transgender. And I'm transgender in spite of being punk. So then what's just being a trans punk? Being a trans punk is only a further realization of not just my gender identity, but my whole identity, like entirely. It's not confusion that I express, it's an entirely fully realized version of me. And the only reason why transphobes attack me is because I am certain of who I am and the destiny that I autonomously choose to live by. And I think, fundamentally speaking, that is one of the most punk rock things you can ever do. I am who I am, whether or not you like it. I am who I am, whether or not your church likes it. And I am who I am, whether or not the state likes it. Before I go, my music from Turf Stop and Ska Bell are finally on Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube and anywhere else where you get music. So go check all that out in the description below, and it's also on Bandcamp. Please comment, like, subscribe, share the video, tell people about the video. And that's it, cuties. Until next time.